Shana Tova, Happy New Year, as my people say. This time of year when we celebrate the Jewish High Holy Days, Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, arrived on Wednesday evening and we celebrated Thursday and Friday and are now in the midst of the period of time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the New Year, and the Day of Atonement, during which it's appropriate to wish one another greetings of Shana Tova. May this be a good year, a new year of sweetness and health, happiness, prosperity, and peace. Now, it's no surprise that Rosh Hashanah is a celebration of the creation of the world's birthday, as it were. But I'll tell you what is a secret, or little known, and that is that even as Rosh Hashanah is what we say as Yom Harat Olam, the birth of the world, there is a rabbinic tradition which comes to us from an ancient text from the 5th century known as Pesachta de Rav Kahana, which posits that Rosh Hashanah, which we celebrate officially on the first of the Hebrew month of Tishrei, is not actually the day on which the world came into being, or if you will, it is not actually Rosh Hashanah, that is not actually the day on which God said, "Let there be light," such that beginning creation followed. According to this 5th century text, that happened. The creation of the world happened 6 days prior, on what would have been the 25th of the previous month. That all but secret teaching, but it's true, it exists, and it informs Jewish consciousness. This teaching says that Rosh Hashanah is the day not on which the world was created, but rather Rosh Hashanah celebrates the day on which Adam, the first human being, was fashioned out of the earth, which is how Adam comes by his name, for Adamah is the Hebrew word for earth. According to this teaching from Pesachta de Rav Kahana, on Rosh Hashanah we celebrate the birthday of humanity, the start of the human race, the existence of every human being on earth. And what do we learn about human beings? We read about this in the first few verses of the creation narrative in Genesis. And specifically, we learn that alone among all the animals, all the creatures great and small with whom we share the animal kingdom, we learn that we human beings, we alone among all that lives on earth, we alone were fashioned B'Tselem Elohim. Human beings were created alone in the divine image. Now that's an incredibly powerful notion, to be created B'Tselem Elohim in the divine image and likeness. Now that term, B'Tselem Elohim, appears only 3 times in the entire Jewish Bible, and all in the first 9 chapters of Genesis. For the rest of the Bible, when human beings are referenced, they use one of 2 terms, either Nefesh Hayah, living soul, a designation we share with all the other animals on the planet, or by turns we are described as possessing kavod, honor and glory, a quality we share in common with our Creator. But only in the first opening verses of Genesis are human beings described as having been created, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image and likeness of God. Further, we should note that whenever the phrase B'Tselem Elohim is used, it is not used exclusively for the divine spark or our ineffable soul or even the essence of God within a human form, but rather B'Tselem Elohim refers to the individual human being in our entirety. B'Tselem Elohim encompasses everything there is to say about our species. A quick survey, but no hands are required. But I ask you to imagine if you were asked to argue for the greatest teaching in the entire Hebrew Bible, or in the Torah specifically, what do you imagine you might select as that most important teaching? In the late 1st and early 2nd centuries of this common era, this was a contentious discussion and debate, and the prevailing opinion as to what is the most important teaching in the Jewish Bible was V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, or love your neighbor as yourself. Now, we appreciate that this is the basis of the Golden Rule, a standard that appears in almost every culture of which we are aware. And it's a good teaching, to be sure, that we ought love our neighbors as ourselves. But there was a rabbi in that time who was named Ben Azai, who argued that there was another teaching which he believed had primacy over how we treat each other, and that is to recognize that each and every human being has been created b'tselem Elohim. For that demands something else of us. If we recognize that we ourselves have been created in the divine image, and that every other human being likewise has been fashioned in the image of the divine, then there is a moral call on us. For to be created b'tselem Elohim means that each and every one of us are possessed of unique and infinite and equal worth. But even more, having been created b'tselem Elohim in God's image means that just as God created the world, which we celebrate on Rosh Hashanah, so too can we, you and I, do the same. And just as human beings were created by God with an aspirational sense of ourselves, so can you and I create or recreate ourselves and our world entire anew. So it is that 20th century theologian Martin Buber taught, every human being's foremost task is the actualization of their unique, unprecedented, and never-recurring potentialities. Leave it to Buber, and this he wrote in the original German. But there is a more simpler distillation of the same message, which is brought to us by 20th century philosopher Rav Joseph Soloveitchik, who taught that the most fundamental principle in an individual's life is that such a person must create him or herself. So deeply has this idea permeated Jewish consciousness that we have the potential, indeed the responsibility, to create ourselves anew. That on Rosh Hashanah, even as we celebrate Yom Ha'arat Olam, the day of the world's creation, so are we also enjoined to celebrate our own creation, our own beginning, and the God-given essential potential within each of us to create ourselves, and by extension, our communities and our world entire anew. So deeply has this cherished idea become part and parcel of what Jews celebrate on Rosh Hashanah, that over the generations, some rabbinic sages, building on Pesikta de Rav Kahana from the 5th century, so do they build on that 5th century teaching that not only was the world created, but so was Adam created on Rosh Hashanah. These sages of later generations suggest that Rosh Hashanah is also the day on which our patriarch Abraham was created. Not on the first Rosh Hashanah, of course, but that Rosh Hashanah was Abraham's birthday. He, after all, was the first Jew. Such that today is not only Adam's birthday and Abraham's birthday, but some say there is another tradition that offers that it is also our patriarch Jacob's birthday, Abraham's grandson, as well. In these ways, the holiday of Rosh Hashanah becomes far more than the birthday of the world, if you will. For by assigning first Adam, and then Abraham, and then Jacob to this day, through an imaginative series of acts I refer to as hermeneutical chutzpah, the tradition's message becomes clear. Even as we celebrate the world's birth on Rosh Hashanah, so our midrashic tradition, the interpretive rabbinical process, argues that this day can be for each of us a sacred, personal day of reflection and self-creation. So can this season of the year be for each and every one of us our own personal day of recreation, such that Rosh Hashanah becomes an opportunity to recreate ourselves, our congregation, our communities, our world entire anew. There is a wonderful story where in the end of Rosh Hashanah worship services, at which there's been so much positive feeling about the potential and possibilities that are so much a part of our broken world, that after the service is concluded, a loyal Jew approaches the rabbi. This individual, in spite of the upbeat mood of the day, is clearly frustrated by the state of the world's present affairs, and who among us can't resonate to that lament? This Jew approaches the rabbi and says, "I heard what you said. I listened closely to your sermon. I heard what you said about Rosh Hashanah being a celebration of God's creation of the world. But I got to tell you, Rabbi, how could God have created a world such as this? What with the injustice and poverty, loneliness, bigotry, hatred, and pain?" Why, the fellow continued, "I could have created the world better myself if I had done it myself." To which the rabbi, without hesitation, responded, "Exactly. And so for what are you waiting? You can indeed, and each of us can, make this world just a little bit better by beginning to recreate ourselves. By creating ourselves and this congregation, our communities, and our world anew. I believe in you," said the rabbi. Let us get started. Shana Tova. Happy New Year.